Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Reiki Guild. Apart from Denver, where it obviously isn't evening yet, it'll be afternoon with you. But wherever you are in the world, a very, very warm welcome to the Reiki Guild webinar. My name is Louise Cardon, and I am your host this evening. As I said, I will be keeping an eye on the chat box, so if you've got any questions or queries, I will be monitoring that. And I'm just going to tell you a few things about the Reiki Guild for those of you who aren't members. The Reiki Guild is an organisation in the UK, and we honour the lineage and teachings of Mikao Usui. We are a professional association and community of Reiki practitioners and teachers, and we're here to inspire and support our members. We organise events such as this webinar, but we also like to give information, keep everyone up to date with what's going on in the Reiki community. And if you want to find out more about the Reiki Guild, I will have some information up at the end of the webinar. So this evening, our webinar is Mrs. Takata and the system of Usui Shiki Reiki Ryoho. And we are very honoured to have with us this evening for our webinar Robert Fueston, who is a well-known Reiki researcher and teacher, practitioner from the USA. He's currently in Kentucky, in Lexington. You may well have seen the publicity that went out about the webinar. Robert has been practicing and teaching and researching Reiki for the past 20 years. He practices the system Usui Reiki, Usui Shiki Reiki. I'm having trouble here because I've covered up my my slides with the chat. I'm just trying to move it. So Robert has studied with direct students of Mrs. Takata, as well as Japanese teachers such as Hiroshi Doi and Hayakuten Inamoto. In 2011, Robert founded the Reiki Preservation Society as a way for students to easily find a traditional Reiki master teacher who was teaching in the style of Mrs. Takata. And the years of research that Robert has done has culminated in his book, which was published last year, which is Reiki Transmissions of Light, Volume 1. So there's more to come. The History and System of Usui Shiki Reiki Ryoho. Robert told me on a call earlier that actually he's on to Volume 3, so there's plenty to look forward to. And as well as practicing and teaching the system of Reiki, Robert's also an acupuncturist and Chinese herbalist. Now, Robert's initial background was in libraries and archives, and obviously this is, I think, what led him to start his quest for finding out more about the history of the system of Reiki. And at the minute, he's still researching, and he's archivist for the Reiki Alliance and a non-Reiki Alliance affiliated group as well, which is also working on Mrs. Takata's archives. So without further ado, I am going to hand over to you, Robert. I don't know whether you want to take control of the screen at this point, or whether you want to just talk.
I could just talk for a little bit.
Yeah. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, which will then put you up.
Okay. And I'm waiting for your face to come up after you stop sharing your screen.
Okay. That didn't work. I'm just going to click start video.
Oh,
So
I see.
Okay. Yeah, I can't stop sharing my screen. Oh, there it is.
Okay. You can't stop.
I can't stop.
You can't stop.
Over to you, Robert.
Okay. Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for viewing and tuning in, and thanks for having me on this program. So the title today is about Mrs. Takata and the system of the Usui Shiki Reiki Ryoho. So I'll just give a very, hopefully, brief background of myself. I started practicing Reiki when I was 21, and I was a senior in college at the time, up in Bowling Green, Ohio. And back then, there was internet, but there weren't like a lot of web pages and stuff like that. So I just found a class flyer, and I saw, oh, it says, this Reiki class was available, which I couldn't believe. There would be some Reiki person, Reiki teacher or master in my area. So I took the class, and that was October 28th, 1996. So he told me to practice every day, and so that's what I've done. And, it was just a really weird circumstance that got me into this Reiki anyway. I hadn't heard the word till a year before when I had gotten into this book club. And it was one of these book clubs where you buy like 6 books for a penny or something. And it was just through the mail. And then you had to agree to buy so many books at regular club price. So one of the books I got for essentially free was on the system of Reiki. I really didn't even want the book, but I had an extra free, selection to choose, so I did. And so this book came, and I kept it for a year before opening it. And that very week that I opened it and read the introduction to Reiki, what it was, said you needed to have a initiation from a master to be able to practice. And so I thought, well, there's no Reiki masters where I live here. So it was that very week that, sure enough, there was the little flyer that I ran into. And so that got my attention, the synchronicity. So yeah, after that, I started practicing, and one thing led to another. And I started talking to as many Reiki people as I possibly could. And, taking the more training and more training. And I came to the point where that everybody I talked to seemed to learn something different. So this was a little bit startling for me, because I thought, what is this? How come if we're all saying we're practicing Reiki, how come I'm doing it this way, you're doing it that way? I started thinking, if I can just get more information, then it will be clear. Well, the more information I got, the more muddy the water became. It became more and more diverse, and then things were contradicting themselves, and it just wasn't clear at all. And I was erroneously told that all the Reiki masters in Japan were killed in World War II. So, the only place I could look was Takata's master students. So, and I didn't have a list. There wasn't a list on the internet. Nobody had this list publicized online. So it took me a while to find them. During this time of my finding these Takata master students, I was in Library and Information Science program, a master's program at the University of South Carolina. So that really helped me with my research. It just kind of all worked out together. And my graduate assistant position, which helped pay for that graduate school, was working in a medical library, which got me into the acupuncture. So I started checking out books on acupuncture, and I went to acupuncture school after this program ended. So, one thing led to another, and here we are. I've been practicing for 20 years now, and this is a special year because back in October I reached my 20-year mark, and now I'm about halfway through to my anniversary day. So pretty soon I'll be having practiced half my life this year, and then the next day more than half my life. So the majority of my life would have been spent practicing Reiki. So eventually I started questioning a lot of things. I needed to get to the source of the information. What was part of the Reiki system, and what wasn't? What was added later or changed or dropped, and why? So the best I could do was find Takata's master students. And so that's what I set out to do. And I'm very fortunate at the timing, because I was able to contact many of them before they passed on, take training with some of them. And the people who had already passed on, luckily I was able to get in touch with either their master students or family members who kept records or their notes that they had received from Mrs. Takata or whatever. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see here. So everybody knew Asui or knows Asui, I would assume. So share screen. You should be seeing a list of Takata's 22 masters. I wrote them out.
Yep.
Okay. So of course Asui's taught a master named Shijiro Hayashi, and his most famous student was Hawayo Takata, who was born on the Hawaiian Islands in 1900. So around 1935, the end of 1935, Mrs. Takata did take the first and second degree Reiki training with Hayashi Sensei. So it's interesting. That was in December. She took both those classes back to back. Mrs. Takata is the only master that I know that has all her certificates from her teacher. So first degree, second degree, and third degree. She has all her teaching certificates from Hayashi. So we know what she learned through what she taught her master students and through her own audio recordings, which there are a lot. Not all of them are made publicly available. She had a book, however, it was never published. That's something that we're working on right now, kind of seeing what we want to do with this unpublished book of Mrs. Takata. It's basically her life story. The book of, excuse me?
Yeah, I was just coughing, sorry.
The summary or Cliff Notes version can be found in Fran Brown's book called Living Reiki. So anyway, so I was very interested in learning what the system was and what it wasn't. And the first thing I had to learn was that something Mr. Takata said, that Reiki is a system. So to be clear, when we talk about Reiki, we have to very much distinguish between Reiki, the energy, right? Reiki, the word, meaning like cosmic energy, universal energy, whatever. The energy, and then the system that we use to utilize that energy. Okay. So Mrs. Takata, always called it Asui, Shiki, Ryoho, Asui style method. And now, of course, there's Gendai and there's Komyo, and there's all sorts of methods out there. So the style or the system one uses, I want to say, we use the name because there's differences, right? There's differences in initiation, differences in levels, differences in symbols, all those things. And so now when we say, oh, I practice Reiki, we don't actually know what that other person's referring to. So knowing the name of the system you practice is essential, and especially for teachers, we should be passing that information on, I think, to our students. So you're looking at my screen. This is Takata's 22 master students. I'm going to start deleting people off of this list. George Araki, gone. And I'm deleting him because he never made master students. Dorothy Baba, same thing, never made master students. Ursula Balo only made her daughter, and I don't know if she made any others, and her daughter never practiced, and then recently she might have started practicing again, but I think that lineage died out. And if you don't, of course, train master students, that lineage dies out. Rick Bachner's alive and well. He's still teaching. Patricia Bowling never made master students. Barbara Brown made a few, I think. Fran made about 30. Phyllis, many. Beth Gray, 2. Only 2. John Herbert Gray made many. Aisha Kruger only made 2. But her lineage, it has died out. And people will say, well, that's not possible. I'm in her lineage. No, it died out. And I can explain that. But I'll explain that quickly. What happened was Iris trained two masters, her daughter and a man named Arthur Robertson, who I got the chance to email and talk to several times before he passed. But Arthur changed the system and called it Reiki and added all sorts of things and changed all sorts of things. And so knowing that the only other master Iris had created was the daughter, I sent Arthur's stuff to her. And she would handwrite on his material, like, never seen this, you know, all this kind of stuff. So he really changed the system. So Iris's teachings are gone. Arthur's system is still around. And it's called Reiki. It is called Reiki. Harry Kaboy made two masters, but only one is still teaching, and the other one never made a master. Ethel Lombardi didn't make any. Barbara McCullough made a few, Mary a few, Paul, Bethel, Faye a few. Virginia made about 5, Wanya several. Kay, I have no evidence that she made any. Maybe she made 1 or 2. So there's a couple big streams of information coming out of Mrs. Takata's lineage. I was lucky to get like Iris Yukuru's stuff and Harry Kaboy's things, which might end up in the Hawaii Takata Sensei archive. We are trying to get the Takata master students material and preserve it. It will be at a university in California. Some of it's already there and they're working on it. Phyllis Promoto sent out an email regarding this, I think 3 or 4 weeks ago. So if you're not on the Office of the Grandmaster mailing list, that's where some of the information is being dispersed. So the interesting thing that I discovered, I think, I'll stop sharing the screen. What I think was most interesting, if I can figure out how to stop sharing. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, it's up the top.
Yeah, I see it now. Okay. Is that what I hear people saying now about the system of Reiki? And they're like, oh yeah, you know, this is so great. You know, we're going back, you know, we're working on our, you know, it's a personal spiritual practice and stuff like that. And Mrs. Takata, you know, she was always about treating other people and stuff. And I'm like, what? Like, that's not the case. It used to be that she told you to practice on yourself and focus on the precepts. And, you know, it all comes back to the precepts, and your practice should bring you closer to living those precepts. So, you know, the spiritual is number 1, she said, and the physical body is number 2. You know, these are her words. And we have these, luckily, recorded, these classes that she did. So we can hear Mrs. Takata teaching these kind of things. And it's interesting how things kind of swing like a pendulum. It goes one way and then it goes back into another way. So right now I feel like there's a swing going back to tradition, although people don't necessarily know they're doing that. If you stick around long enough, it will swing around the other way again and people will rebel. So the system of Reiki simply has the 5 precepts, hand positions, 4 initiations in the first degree, concepts about money, so which sometimes causes hangs up in people, but it's all about self-empowerment. But the precepts stand out as being number 1. The hand positions, you know, we use them to cover every major organ of the body so that every organ gets treatment with the Reiki, and so that the new practitioner will give a therapeutically effective treatment, because they might not be sensitive enough yet to know which area of the body needs the most energy. So they have to touch the area and then be able to feel how much pull or draw is being, you know, pulled out their hand into that body. You know, it's a different system than other systems that say, oh, you just put your hands on and Reiki goes wherever it's going to go. That's not the system that Hayashi taught, and it's definitely not the system Mrs. Takata taught. Otherwise, we wouldn't have all these hand positions. And, you know, otherwise there'd be one hand position, right? Just do the head and then the Reiki goes wherever. But we use them because the body's like a sponge, and the energy, right, you could think of as water, and we're just like the pipe. So we put our hands on and we just wait, and that body, you know, a sponge will pull water into it. So it will pull, and we'll feel that come out, you know, our hands. And when it stops, the sensation in our hands go away. So that's when we know to move on. So the practitioner is not guiding it, directing it, or anything. We're just simply putting our hands on in first degree, letting Reiki flow through us, and that's it. And that's like, there's a very systematic approach to giving the treatment. So that's part of Usui Shiki Reiki Ryoho, which is mostly lost now, it seems like. So, you know, generally, you know, you never know how long you'll be in one spot. You know, maybe 5-10 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, maybe 1 minute. You know, if it's not pulling, you move. It's just that simple. Let's see here. It's 4:25. Time flies. So that's a kind of an overview of first degree in a nutshell. Second degree is about absentee treatments, mental, emotional treatments, receiving another initiation. And third degree was always about teaching, always about teaching it. Like, there was no point in going into the third degree unless you were going to teach, you know. So, you know, first and second degree comprises the complete practitioner course. And third degree was the teacher training, which would take place in intensives or long apprentices. And Takata would dish out information little by little. Like, you know, here's how to do the first degree, now go teach it. And I'll come back. You know, I'll see you in 4 months and I'll tell you how to do the second degree initiation, how to teach that class. And then she'd come back and do this. So we're very fortunate because some of Hayashi's things survive through the Takata lineage, and they are going into those archives. So the things that I've been made aware of working with them have been, I feel, extremely important. And the good thing about the archive is most of it will be digitized, which means even, you know, the Europeans will be able to go online and view these documents, most of them. There's only some that we put restrictions on, where they can't be photoed because we hold them as sacred, and we don't want them, you know, we want them held with respect. But you can go there, you know, and see them. So, wow, 4:27. So time really does fly. That's a nutshell version of the system of Usui Shiki Reiki Ryoho. But I wrote, you know, extensively about it in the book. So let me find. I want to share my screen. Or I don't have to share. Yeah. Excuse me?
Yeah, the button for sharing screen is down the bottom.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was looking because we had some questions that people wanted addressed. So I'm going to just read this question. It says, I've heard that Mrs. Takata did distant attunements. I'd love to know if that was the case. If so, what the circumstances were, how the rest of the training done, et cetera, many things. Okay, so this question, right? I've heard that Mrs. Takata did distant attunements, right? Yes and no. She never did attunements, not even in person. She did initiations. And that's a very lineage specific and a very system specific verbiage. Words like attunements versus initiations, they do mean different things. And Takata always referred to it as like initiations. It's very different than something, you know, than the word attunement. Just like we always call it in the system of Usui Shiki Reiki Ryoho, we say first degree, second degree, third degree. We don't say Reiki 1, Reiki 2, Reiki. That's a different system. So there's certain usages because they mean certain things inside of a system. So Mrs. Takata, I was surprised when I went down to Duke University. I found a letter from her and written to Doris Duke, who was the richest lady in the world at one point. And Takata was basically saying, yeah, you know, by the way, when I was telling you how to do the second degree symbol, you know, the what people call the empowerment symbol or the power symbol, or you know, so the letter was very clear that second degree was given to Doris remotely. And I'm going to share my screen so you can see part of that letter. I scanned it. It's in my book. I just have to figure out where the share the screen is again. Here it is, share the screen. Okay, desktop one. Share. Okay, you seeing this screen here?
Yep.
Okay. So this is Appendix 5 in my book, and I'm just going to scroll down. I don't know, is that pretty clear? Do I need to make it bigger?
No, it's clear.
Okay. So this is Mrs. Takata's letter. After talking to you on the phone, I realized that the symbol is easy to master, but the important thing is your hand should be initiated to make it work. So that is the problem. So Mrs. Takata had described how to draw the first symbol over the phone, but had not done the initiation. So she writes further, I must contact you by shortwave and do the initiations by remote control. All right, shortwave is another technical term we use. Basically, you could think of it as an absentee method. So she's going to do the initiation by remote control, you know, remotely. And she says, which I've done in the past. Okay, so that being said, so yes, Mrs. Takata did do these initiations remotely on occasion, but it was a very rare occasion. Very rare. But back then, I mean, you know, you think about it, there weren't many teachers. Like now, you can't go, you know, many city blocks without running into Reiki people, right? But back then, that wasn't always the case. So sometimes you had to do it. Like she didn't want to do it that way. So it was interesting because a friend of mine, Marta Getty, knew Mrs. Takata and was accepted as a master's student, but Mrs. Takata died before doing the training. But when I showed her what I found at the Duke University, these letters, she's like, I'm going to tell you something that I never, you know, brought up before, you know, and she told me about a conversation she had with Mrs. Takata, and she gave me permission, so she wrote it and sent it to me so I could put it in my book. But it was basically Marta asking, hey, can you do initiations remotely? And Mrs. Takata was like, yes, but, you know, she didn't like doing it. So that response is in the book as well. So, you know, for me, I don't think it's the best way of teaching. It's better to be in person because you need to be shown things, and there's a certain energy or an energetic exchange when people physically meet. Like now we have Skype, but even so, you know, these online video things, even so, it's not the best way of teaching. I will physically move my students' hands to the right place of the body if they're off. We have practice time, and there's just a very different energetic situation going on when we're in person. Just like right now when I'm doing this webinar, it feels very different than when I'm doing live, you know, with people in the room with me, when I'm doing lectures that way. So that was the first question I received. Did I answer all of it? Oh, what the circumstances were? Yeah, it was a severe circumstance. First was like far away, or sometimes they're in a hospital or something like that. So the training was done over the telephone, some through the letters, right? This is before email existed. And then I found in the Duke archive a copy of the 3 second degree symbols that Mrs. Takata did send to Doris. So that's all there from chapter appendix 5, I should say. So somebody else wrote, I was curious, this is another question from your group. I was curious about any specific guidance or advice regarding absentee treatments, about the impact of inaccuracy of Reiki symbols, and any experiences with charging written text or inanimate objects. Oh, somebody's trying to send me a fax. So, well, in the second degree, right, we have specific methods, two that Takata taught routinely. One was called the knee thigh method, and one was not the knee thigh method. And so that comes with second degree. Now, as far as inaccuracy of Reiki symbols, it's a tricky question. It's a tricky question. We know how Takata has written them. We know how she received them from her teacher. And of course today, I've seen them backwards, upside down. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff. And I can't speak to that, but I can speak to the fact that, I'm speaking American English and you're speaking British English, and it works. We can understand each other. Although, our handwriting would be a little different, it's recognizable. But once something changes beyond recognition, then, is it really the same thing anymore? That's an open-ended question. Is it the same thing? I mean, at some point, it's something else, right? It's something else. So it's best to, of course, think about that. But experience charging written text. So you can charge things, right? And people think, oh, Mrs. Takata is all about treating people. I mean, yeah, she treated a lot of people. I mean, she practiced for over 40 years. But she would charge things like scarves. Like if somebody had a throat problem, she would charge their scarf. And then the person was supposed to wear their scarf, Wanya Twine, one of Takata's master students, told a story on video about Mrs. Takata charging Wanya's third degree certificate. And when people would be at Wanya's house and people would walk past the certificate hanging on the wall, they'd be like, oh, you have a hot spot here, And, they didn't really realize. And she's like, oh, it's the certificate on the wall, And of course, most people might have thought Wanya was crazy for saying that, but she's like, Takata charged it really, really well, So Takata did do things like that, So it's not, prohibitive. Either is sending Reiki to situations. Takata did that. I gave an example in my book as well. But yeah, so I think that question has been fulfilled. So I talk about those things in the book because I want it to be clear, especially now, what the Suishiki Reiki Ryoho is, because there's not a lot written about it. So, it was written about a long time ago, like, when I was growing up, before I got into Reiki in the early 1980s. But since then, mostly what's written is other styles of practice, which is fine. I've studied and trained in those styles. And that's mostly what the books are out there. So I wanted to, I was asked to write this book. So, I eventually consented to doing so. So let's see now, it would be a good time for questions and answers since we have like maybe 20 minutes or so left.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so initially, if you have a question, if you can type it in the box, and I'm also going to see whether I can get you live into the call. Please switch your mobile phones off before going on.
That's me.
Yeah, I know it's you.
That's my Darth Vader theme song. Okay.
Okay, so anybody got any questions or comments? Please type into the box so that I can see them. and then I may be able to get you on live if you're willing to do that. So any questions or comments? Okay, so while you're thinking about that, I have started reading Robert's book. It is available on Amazon, but there were only 2 when we looked on Friday, so there's probably only 1 now. Sorry. One thing I was curious about: how did Mrs. Takata meet Doris Duke? Do you know?
Well, she, let me think about that. Do I know? Let me think about this. Doris had a place in the Hawaiian Islands.
Okay.
And Takata became pretty well known. And Doris had some interest in spiritual things and health problems. I think that's how they met. And Doris broke her arm at one point and took Mrs. Takata with her on a world around the world cruise so that Takata could treat her on the cruise boat.
Nice work if you can get it.
Nice work. And Mrs. Takata, they were near Japan at the time during that cruise, and Mrs. Takata's like, let's have your cast off early because I'm sure it's fine because you can sense. She's like, and if I'm right, I want you to send me back to Japan because I haven't been there, in umpteen years, and so that's what she. That's one of the times she went back to Japan. Yeah. So.
Okay, they're all very quiet.
They're all quiet.
They are quiet. I did warn you this was a possibility, didn't I?
Yeah, you did warn me about that.
Yeah. Anybody want to make any comments or ask any questions of Robert? Because he's got 20 years worth of research in that little brain of his. Okay, hi Val. How are you down the road in Hull? Did Mrs. Takata believe that there were any contraindications with Reiki? So when I was first originally taught Reiki, for instance, Robert, we were told there were certain conditions that you should not treat.
Mm-hmm.
And then I took a class years later and was told that wasn't true.
Right.
Do you have any evidence what Mrs. Takata thought about that?
Yeah. The biggest things there's no contraindications known, but Mrs. Takata was wary about one. Mm-hmm. And that was after a stroke, but you have to, so this is where it gets a little tricky. There's open and closed stroke, and in Chinese medicine, which actually most of the Reiki treatments are based on, one you would do acupuncture, one you wouldn't. And Takata just basically blanket said, don't do it for 21 days, which comes straight out of Chinese medicine. But, that was her, I don't know why she said that, but she said it for good reason. I know why she said it, but John Harvey Gray, her master student, had a stroke, and he got treatment right away from his second wife. And, he had no residual effect. They couldn't believe that he had even had a stroke. They went to the hospital and everything, but they were surprised because he was treated right away. Yeah. So I say no contraindications. Takata gave that one kind of shady one, but I could see where she was coming from.
Yeah, I actually have read the chapter in your book. I'm on chapter 6, I think. So I read the bit about how you thought that Hayashi may have been trained in Chinese medicine.
Right.
And as being trained in Chinese medicine yourself, you could see how a lot of these things made sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't see that for years because, I'm a very, I was able to box my Reiki information in my brain and my Chinese medicine enough because I didn't want, I wanted to see Reiki system as the Reiki system and not gunk it up. And so finally, when I let those boxes touch in my brain and I started reading the Hayashi manual, I'm like, this is straight out of Chinese medicine. And all this stuff that Takata was saying is straight out of Chinese medicine. I mean, it's just, now it's clear as day.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Val. That was a really good question. Anybody else got anything they would like to add? Deborah? Some people use crystals with Reiki. Is this a no-no or up to personal choice? You were talking about charging a scarf.
Right.
So could we charge a crystal for a
Oh, yeah, I mean, you can, and I don't know, I mean, people can, you could charge whatever. It's not like a no-no, but I do remember an interesting story. Helen Haverly wrote a book on Mrs. Takata from like all these audio tapes of Takata telling her life story. And, in that, I think it was in that book, this question was posed to her. And she's like, yeah, you can, but I mean, you're charging a crystal, and then what are you going to do with that crystal? Put it on somebody, I don't know, put it on somebody. Why don't you just put your hands on them?
Yeah.
So like, that was like, she's like, you're adding another step. But in the case of the scarf, right? Like maybe you could charge it and give it to them, and then, that way when you're not physically there, they can still use it. I mean, I can see the value in that. So did Takata teach about crystals and stuff? No, but that's okay. I mean, she did demonstrate, charging things like scarves and certificates, and yeah, so I don't see an issue with that, as long as we're clear,
Yep.
what it's for.
So they've warmed up now. I've got another question. So this is from Sai. I hope that's how I pronounce your name, Sai, because I have no clue really. Sai in Denver. And they're asking, in your research, have you determined where the concept shifted from an initiation reaction to a 21-day detox or anticipated healing crisis?
This is terrible, but I think I did know the answer, and I'm trying to think what it was now, because that was that was a really big thing where people were saying, this 21-day detox. Oh, I think I remember now. Somehow people, I think, got confused because Asui went up on the mountain for how long?
21 days.
21 days. And then I think that's where they got the 21 from.
Okay.
On the 21st day, he didn't have a reaction. He had the great light, right? Mm-hmm. But this somehow got thrown into another part of the system. And so Takata did talk about reactions. Absolutely. I mean, she talked about, when the person gets enough Reiki in their body for their body to have that massive shift, a lot of stuff can happen, including like a lot of loose stools and, sweating and all this. So it looks like they're sick, but their body's finally well enough to flush all that junk out. I mean, we shouldn't have kidney stones and gallstones and all that stuff. And the body, when it's well enough, will get rid of that stuff, and it's got to eliminate it somehow. So it's coming out, That's a good sign. Takata always talked about that, healing reaction was a great sign that the treatments were effective. Yeah. But yeah, the 21-day thing itself, I think, got snatched from Asui's 21 days on the mountain.
Right. Okay, anybody else got anything they would like to ask Robert, or do you have any comments on what we've heard from Robert so far this evening? Okay, Carolina. Do you see the hand positions being prescriptive or allowing intuitive placements of the hands during session?
Gotcha. Yeah, so in first degree, we teach a series of 12 standard hand positions plus a whole bunch of optional hand positions, and that's because they're first degree students. But your hands will, with practice, tell you where to go. And Takata repeatedly said, listen to your hands, listen to your hands, listen to your hands, because she knew, that this concept of Reiki or intuition would happen when people practice. So, during treatments, I'll start, people like having, when you have clients coming in, they like to know what you're going to do, right? So I always start, and I want to charge but when stuff happens, yeah, you go with the intuition, of course. However, right, beginning students typically need a standard form of practice. Otherwise, they're not going to practice because they don't know what they're doing. And they're like, I don't feel anything. I don't, or I don't have any of these experiences. They need a set standard protocol, and that will take them right further along in their practice to where these kind of things like Reiki happen. And Takata was very much stating this kind of thing. Give them a practice, and then it'll take them where they need to go.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Okay, anything else? We've got time for a couple more questions. If anyone has any questions? Deborah, did Takata use meridians as a basis for treatment?
Boy, these are. I'm trying to think of the most simple explanation, and it depends on how you think.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's certain protocols that Mrs. Takata would teach, and that are actually in the Hayashi manual, like working not exactly on the soles of the feet, but on the I'll say I guess it's the instep of the feet.
So the arch.
The arch, right? It's the foot tie-in channel, spleen channel. So they say put your hands there for mouth sores.
Okay.
Right? Why? Like But if you study the meridian system, you'll see that there's lots of meridians for foot tie-in, but one of them will wrap around the lips, and there's all these kind of things. So she didn't really explain it that way. She didn't talk about meridians, so she didn't talk about meridians at all. But she would be like, for eye disorders, treat the ovaries, which is straight out of Chinese medicine too, because ovaries look like eyes. You got two of them, they look like eyeballs, right? So, these kind of things, like treat this and this will happen in the body. That she just told you to do it.
Yeah.
So she didn't go into it. She wasn't going to explain it. But she did study things in China, like facial diagnosis.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
So that's a kind of a hard to answer in 1 minute or less, but
yeah, no, I think that has answered the question. So Damien's asking, would Mrs. Takata use shortwave, absent, distant, forward or backwards across time, or just live?
Just live, like present day stuff. Yeah. I have to be very clear here, because like the example I'm thinking of, it was a live situation. It was a live situation where she was at this flea market, and this person had all these, I can't remember what they were, but all these little items they were selling, and they weren't being sold. And so she did something, and then somebody came in right at the end and bought all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then the people had the money and then had to pack it up and go home with. That was a live situation. There's an interesting book. Wanya Tuan has like 4 books, I think, but I think it's her first book, In the Light of a Distant Star. It's a little hard to get. You can get through her daughter, if anybody's interested. But, I think it's in that book or a video I have of her that, basically she wasn't sure she was going to show up to the first degree class. And so she was like just laying in bed, not going to the class. And all of a sudden, like she had this, light from outside come and hit her in the head and everything. And then she went, that's the sign, I'm going to the class, And I'm sure that this is my thinking, that Mrs. Takata, before her class, was sending out the Reiki for people who were supposed to be in that class to show up. and boom, it hit her. So that was a life situation. So I can't think of any example of Mrs. Takata sending it to the past or the future. Doesn't mean it didn't happen, but in this moment, I can't think of any.
Yeah. So I think what Damien's asking is that sometimes, in classes, we're told that if there's something in your past that needs healing, you can send Reiki back to that situation.
Right.
Or
right.
Something coming up in the future which you're worried about, or it's
right. Yeah. I get that. And my thinking is, absolutely, try that. But the thing is, like, if the present is all the accumulation of the past, just by treating yourself in the present, that's where you need it, because that's where you are. So if you have trauma and it's here now in the present, it doesn't matter if it happened 5 minutes ago or 10 minutes ago or 20 years ago. It's here now. It's still here. So treat it here. And that's my own thing,
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So Cora is asking, was Mrs. Takata a wealthy woman? What was her standing in the community?
Well, she started as, when she was small, she was really poor. Her family was very, very poor. And through her hard work, I chronicle her different jobs that she had growing up.
Yeah.
And then, when her husband died, leaving her with 2 small kids, and she overworked herself, and that's how she ended up in Japan. So by the end of it all, all those years later, she had money, and she had invested her money and did well.
Okay, and then we've got a question from Pauline. How did Mrs. Takata use the symbols?
Well, that's something specific to the second degree class, right?
Yeah.
So, there's 3 symbols we utilize in the second degree, and they each have their function. But one is to basically gather all the scattered energy of the universe and concentrate it into an area. It focuses it. And another one is more for directly accessing the subconscious and cosmic mind in a person. And the other one is to create a bridge or a connection to somebody who's physically not present. The remote, people say remote, or absentee treatment. Yeah. So she used the symbols primarily like that. Now in initiations, of course, we use them in other ways, but still a lot like this.
Yeah, I'm reading between the lines, but I'm guessing that maybe this is about whether she used the symbols actually with the people she was giving treatment for, or were they used as tools for personal practice?
Right. No, she used them during, they all have their each function, right? Yeah. So for, you use them during treatments, but there's, of course, initiations. And then so I don't know how to answer that.
No. Yeah. Okay. Okay, another question from Sai. How important or what emphasis did Takata place on, Sai is pronounced Z. Well, in English it would pronounce Z, but we'll say Z. Okay, so how important or what emphasis did Takata place on habit changing techniques?
Well, it was an important aspect of the second degree. You can think of it, in the second degree, that habit changing technique could be a life changer. So it's a very important technique, and I found it to be very effective. Yeah, very effective. So, it is just as important as any other part of the class, and really the parts of the class, she taught them in short time length. So they were all pretty important stuff, and I don't think she wasted her breath on other things that weren't so important. So I think it was a pretty important technique, and I use it all the time.
Yeah, I find it very useful. Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to say one more question as we're coming up to 9 o'clock in the UK. If anyone has one last question they would like to ask live on here. Robert has very kindly said that he would answer questions later, because I know some people will be listening to the recording rather than being here with us live this evening. So if you are listening to the recording and you do have some burning question you'd like to ask Robert, I will give you an email contact in a few minutes' time. So has anybody got anything they would like to ask? No, you did really well coming up with the questions towards the end. It was a slow start, but we got there, so that was great. So I'm just going to share my screen now, which has got Robert's email on. When I get there. Okay, so what Robert said to me was that he's happy to answer any questions, but he hates email. So if you send him the questions, he may well, if he's got several, put them together in a video, and then I can share that video in our Facebook group, or we can email it to the people who ask the questions. So this is Robert's email, robert@thereikipreservationsociety.org. Double check that is right, Robert.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. So if you do have any questions, especially if you're listening to the recording, by all means drop Robert a line, and we can get some kind of response back to you, hopefully. Here's the Reiki Guild's information. You can also send questions through to info@thereikiguild.co.uk. Or if you want, our office number is there. It's a London number, 020-8462-1224. If you're perhaps listening to the recording or watching live and you're not a Reiki Guild member and you're interested in finding out more about us, you can find that out either by emailing or calling, or going to thereikiguild.co.uk. So that's just about covered everything. I want to thank Robert so much for coming on here this afternoon for you. I'm sure everyone got a lot out of it. I'm just going to check the chat again. There's some more comments in the chat. Yeah, so I've got some comments for you. Thank you, Robert. Oh, you've already answered that one. Thank you so much for hosting interesting, useful webinar. I love being a member of the Reiki Guild. Yay, it's good. Bright blessings and warmest good wishes to you. So thank you everyone for being with us this evening. It was lovely to have you with us. And do get back to us if you have any more questions. Okay, I've stopped the recording now. So that's the end of our transmission, if you like. So thank you so much, Robert.
Thank you.
I am enjoying the book. I'll say I'm about halfway through. So good luck with volumes 2 and 3. We look forward to seeing you. And if I get any more comments coming through us, we'll pass them on to you. But enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. You do the same, although you don't have much day left.
We don't know. It's nearly my bedtime. So, yeah, we will close the meeting. So thank you, everyone, for being here.
Bye.